I just want to talk about something about action design. Something very basic. I think we should probably start with that before even to talk about the regulation for piano action. We should take care about some different parameters. Normally, the piano maker should take care about, but there is very often a lot of problem with that, and so that's why I will give you some advices to some way to control the dimension of your piano action first before even to start working on it. So if you rebuild piano, if you have to replace hammers, or just if you only have to do the regulation, you really need to control the geometry of your action first, and after start do something else. That's what I do. I apologize first for my terrible English. I'm in New Zealand for about a year, but still with a terrible English and terrible accent. So
very well.
So first, I just want to explain how to order new hammers when you have to replace it. I will talk a little bit about the weapon, the different type of weapon, and the dimension you need to control. Something with called the magic lines, and action ratio. You probably hear about some of this, some of that some years ago. I think you invited David Stanwood some years ago. So action ratio is one of his subjects. And maybe if we have time, and we'll talk a little bit about some jigs and some easiest way for you to control all of that, and maybe a little quiz just for fun. And the idea is not I talk during 2 hours, so you are welcome to ask questions at any time and to share your own experience as well. So that's pretty interesting, I think, if I'm not alone to talk. So what you will know today, so first why you need to control action design parameters. You don't need to have a computer, you don't need to have fancy tools or something like that. You will learn the standards of piano industry. The idea is not to explain how to redesign, to change an existing action. That's a bit more difficult and risky as well. So I think that's pretty interesting if you know the standards. All the important parameters, and so yeah, how to order a new set of new hammers. I just write this sentence, even if you think you do not need it. I think personally you need to know something about that. All of that, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Okay. So first, you have to forget absolutely the idea that the hammer makers have the dimension of the hammer you want, except for a very standard model. If you order a set of hammers for Steinway, that's acceptable, what they send normally, but if you have a 5 feet bandman, or I don't know, whatever. So just they don't have the dimension of the original hammer of the factory. Even if you send them your original parts, they have no idea about the quantity of felt who was on the hammer when they were new. That's why they just send standard parts, standard drill distance, standard angles, and probably 99% of time that's just totally not adapted to your piano, and that's very easy for you to make a custom-made order. That's with Renner. That's always a little bit difficult with them, but with Abel, they have very good website, and you can order the hammer exactly like you want. The felt is what it is, but the dimensions are normally respected exactly. They just do what you want to have. So some parameters, some just first thing you need to know, and you know already, the hammers strike the wire at a 90 degrees angle. That's pretty normal, or they should strike the wire with a square angle. The hammers should follow the string's angle as much as possible. With some model that's just impossible. If you want to do that on a Steinway Model B, that's it doesn't work. You can't follow the string's angle because of the division. The length of the tail. I don't know if you see my. Why is it's not full screen? Okay, good. Okay, the hammer strikes the string at an 80 degrees angle, follows the string angle as much as possible. The tail length, you have to choose the right wood form as well. There is different one, I will show you a bit later. Just the angles, so you have the 91 degrees there. 91, that's what nearly all the piano makers use. Do you know why it is 91 degrees and not 90 degrees, for example? No. Okay. I answer to my question later. So the borrowed length for this hammer, that's 55, but it doesn't matter for the values.
Is that bottom measurement from start? The bottom measurement near the coving? That bottom measurement near the coving?
You mean the 15 and the
15, yes.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter. That's just for my drawing. The 275, that's half diameter. That's just everybody comes with it. But, it doesn't matter so much. Another parameter is called over-centering. I don't know if you can see exactly what it is. That's the distance. That's the 3 millimeters, just right there, between these two lines. The line, parallel to the keyboard, and just right there, the center pin high, and the second line who is the center of the boring. Okay, and so there is this 3 millimeters, and why there is this 3 millimeters when the hammer strikes the string? That's because of the 91 degrees. So that's the standard dimension. I can show you just up. So imagine you have standard shanks. That's 130. That's vertical. Right there. If you have a 91 degrees angle, and if you take the measurements between these two lines this one and this one, you find not exactly, but nearly 3 millimeters. So that's the German convention, okay, the German maker convention. And so that's why you have the 91 degrees and you have your 3 millimeters right there.
So that, if we were placing hammers on in historic instruments, that is what you allow for?
It depends what you call historical instruments.
Yeah. Well, 100-year-old Bechstein.
Yeah, Bechstein. So for Bechstein, there is some. The wood form is not exactly the same, and you have really to take care about the wood form. It's very important for Bechstein.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something you normally you should use for nearly all modern piano.
Okay.
After
and,
yeah.
And in current Asian pianos, what do you allow for that? Same
For
amount?
Asian piano, that's just copy of German. Yeah.
Oh.
But if it's Bechstein, you have to bore it at 92 degrees because the soundboards collapse.
Yeah. For example.
The strings are going down.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's the nearly the standard dimension.
Change it to this one and then
Now it doesn't work. Okay. So, and the question is why you have overcentering now? There is many reasons for that. We consider that because of the overcentering, the shanks is not parallel when the string, when it touches the strings. There is an impact on the sound because I don't know, maybe you know a little bit about what we call the longitudinal frequency. Talk to someone maybe. Yeah.
The frequency in between.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
direction.
So the string
Instead
moves
of,
like that normally, but moves like that
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
And when the hammer normally, when the hammer and the shank strike the string with 90 degrees angle everywhere, normally you should not have so much longitudinal frequency. That's the theory. And so with these 3 millimeters, you are not parallel, so you have a little bit more this frequency. That's very high partial, but there is an impact on the sound. And there is an impact as well on because of your blow distance, your regulation. If you have these 3 millimeters, the angle of your shank when the key starts is a little bit more up. Yeah. So if you don't have this overcentering, the shank is that's who you don't see. Yes, you see this time. Okay. I mean. So yeah, you can see there that the shank is not exactly parallel. Okay, and if you make some modification with overcentering, there is an influence, of course, so on the angle. Normally you have to change the bored length as well. I will talk about it a little bit later. So that's some parameters. The bored length, it's a very difficult calculation. So that's string height less center pin height less overcentering. So for example, with this piano right there, the strings, that's 208. So you can choose 55 for the bored length because the center pin is at 150 and 3 millimeters, that's the overcentering. The standard dimension for the hammer center pin, it's more 146 normally for Steinway, Yamaha and all these pianos. It's 146. Today I will not explain how you can change the position of the hammer center pin, because if you change that, you can of course, but that's a huge amount of problems if you, potentially if you do it, because of course you can change the strike point. So yeah, we start, I consider today just to keep that like it is on your piano, and you try with that to have the best action as possible with this parameter. So the can say something. They are the 14 millimeters, or about the hammer center pin height. The 14 millimeters between your pin block and hammer center pins. That's sort of security, just because you need to take out your action sometimes, and without any problems, without you having the screws against your pin block. And, normally, yeah, it should be 14 millimeters. That's why the standard dimensions, Steinway and some others, the pin block is at 160, not 164 like on this drawing. 160, 14 millimeters, that's the security. Hammer center pin height, 146. So about the tapering, so you know that's the way to cut your hammer on the side. To the nearly only advantage is just to have have hammer lighter. For me, I consider, I show you on the drawing, the maximum for tape. Where is it? Tapering. The maximum you can do for the tapering, for me, that's 2 millimeters on both sides at the bottom of the hammer. That's the maximum I do. You, of course, it depends on the weight you want to earn there, and that's only on one side, but that's because there is a symmetry function, of course. But you do it on both sides, yeah. And you can ask Abel as well to do it for you. You can do it, and you can buy a tool from Spurlock, I think. Well, this, you know that probably. But Abel do it very well as well, so doesn't matter. Okay. And about the tail, don't worry about the 38 and the 20, that's just for the drawing. I tried nearly everything, I think, for the shape. So you have to take care about the length, of course. So between the length between the bottom of your hammer and your shank. For me, that's fine if this length is 27. If you have an overcentering of 3 millimeters. So you can consider 24 plus overcentering to find this dimension. Just earlier, we have seen how to calculate the bore-end length. So with this 2 dimension, you have your total length. So you can order your hammer. About this, the curve just there. For me, I can show you. That's better. So it works. The best result I had is to have the something like that tail. Not 15, but you can even do something like that. That's not very conventional. But for the back check and for your regulation, for me that's probably the best the best shape.
So you
So
don't,
very small, very small
so
job.
when you mark tiles, you don't, I mean the Spurlock jig for doing that.
It's not easy.
He takes typically about half the length
Yeah.
of the.
That's why normally I do not use the Spurlock tool. Or
like
you can make one as
make
well.
You like a much tighter radius.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
and that's why I prefer to do it just not by hand, but I can show you some photos of that if you want. I just work all the hammer screwed to the action, and with sanding machine, and the system, of course, to clamp your hammer shanks. And with experience, you can do pretty good work, and with tighter radius, just right there. But that's not very conventional. It doesn't look really like a normal hammer, but the other piano maker just use pretty large radius, and even for example on the Steinway Model D, if you can have your hammer for the first bass, for A to ABC, if you can have your hammer catch by your back check if you play piano or mezzo forte, please tell me how you do that, because I can't do it myself. With original hammer, that's just impossible. It's not made for it.
They bounce out.
Yeah, that just bounce here. And as well on the Steinway, that's short, it's very short, the tail length, and so that's very bad idea, but that's what they do since 1 century and a half.
Sorry, so
Yeah.
why do you think that shorter curve works?
Because I tried it. I have no reason. The computer can't do anything for me on
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah, that's the.
entirely valid.
But that's a good question. I have no idea exactly. The back check is something pretty hard to design even with the computer. When I buy a new keyboard, so the keyboard comes of course with all the pilots and buttons, without the back check, and even without the holes for the back check. I prefer to do it just manually, to just move by hand, to move the back check on the with at the back of the key, and try to find exactly the best place. I already ordered keyboard with I thought it was a good drawing, and finally after I just bent so much the back check, and that's ridiculous.
You've only got two variables in there really, which is pressure and surface area.
Yeah,
There's going to be a magic thing somewhere in there.
Yeah, and some other parameters as well. Some other one as well.
I was waiting.
Yeah.
Does that, do you feel a real positive, real clunk of catching when the hammer comes into the check? Yeah, do you really feel it? Because certainly the larger radius is a very smooth check.
Yeah, true. That's a little bit noisy as well.
Sorry?
This shape
This is like this noisy.
is a little bit noisy, but it depends on the style of your back check.
Yeah.
If you, I use no German part when I replace the piano, except the hammer, because I can't do.
So which parts do you prefer?
Tokiwa.
Particular?
Yeah.
Okay.
What they do now is just nearly perfect. I have some part. I bring with me some Tokiwa part if you want, on some hammer and weapon set I already replaced. The part I have with me are the worst of the set, of course, and I can show you that's much better than Rene and than everyone else.
Sorry, just going back to this short curve here, or any curve on any hammer tail, you're sanding across the tail, or are you sanding down the tail? I mean, for example.
Okay. Down the tail, but.
So basically, the tail itself is relatively smooth.
I tried as well to do like Yamaha, with big.
Sure.
I've seen no difference. I don't understand why. I can't tell you why,
Okay.
but
But Bösendorfer, for example, have a very smooth tail.
yeah. Me, I have very, very smooth stay as well. Yeah.
I do notice one thing, and that's how much yellow leather is covering the inside of the piano after a period of
Exactly.
time. Yeah.
But with Yamaha, the Yamaha, I've seen, the last one I've seen, that's crazy. They do it with how do you say in English? File. Yeah.
They're called checkering files, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know, but that's just horrible.
Yeah. I really don't think it's necessary.
No.
Have you noticed that your checks get indented or worn in that very tight spot of checking? Because you're not using your entire back check, are you? So do you?
No, I take care about the angle. You have to. That's very important.
Yes.
But no, when the curve is the radius is pretty tight, you use only a pretty small part of the back check.
But you haven't seen it prematurely wear.
No. And even on piano where I played 12 hours a day. Nobody complain now. I hope.
You're a long way away too.
I did it before New Zealand during about 6 years. I think I replaced approximately between 10 and 12 keyboard and action a year. Every year, but mostly Steinway, but some others sometimes. And so I tried a lot of different things. And if you use about the noise, if you use Tokiwa back checks, they are probably a little bit less precise than compared to Yamaha, but the felt is a little bit thicker, and there is no noise. Yeah, that's what I used even for my own piano. I use that, and it's totally fine. You have no noise, and the hammer is catch very well, even on the Steinway. Even on the Steinway. So, so that's not the standard, but yeah, that's just by experience. That's what you can find on Abel website. You can send it. You can use the form online, but you can as well send it by mail or something like that, and you have nearly everything. The number of bass, the shade and tail and broad lens. The only problem is you understand that the broad lens is calculate about string height, and that's just never the same for one piano. If you measure the string height even on one section, because of the tension and the frame moves and everything, you have not the same, and sometimes the difference are significant. So what I do is I drill hammer individually with board length, calculate to the exact string height.
Yes.
And because of that, you can have, when everything is done, your action is regulated. All your shanks are exactly at the same level. That's beautiful. Exactly at the same level.
Feels wonderful.
Yeah. So the only compromise, of course, you can. I did it, but that's annoying. Normally, you have only 2 different total lengths. So of course, if you have a variable board length, you have a variable tail length as well. So you compromise a little bit on the tail.
And your hammer line's just a tiny bit.
That's more important. And the tail.
You don't worry about having your hammer line travelling up a fraction.
Yeah. What I did one time is to have one total ends for each hammer, different for each one. And so of course with a very, very small variation.
Yeah.
So I asked that Abel, and they just wanted to kill me, but they did it. And because it was pretty interesting for this piano, and I think the variation was only 2 millimeters for the treble section, but
it's not almost not noticed.
No, it's not too bad. Yeah. Just something pretty useful. Don't worry about the equation. It looks very complicated, but that's not. When I glue hammer, so I take care about, of course, the shank length, the bored length, but I take this measurement as well. What I call Al-Kashi distance. That's just because that's the name of the guy who invented this theorem. The calcul you have there, that's if you just forgot the end, you have Pythagoras. Okay?
Okay.
But the end, that's just because the angle there is not 90 degrees, it's 91. And this theorem is just used when you have a triangle, not square. You can use it exactly the same way than Pythagoras. And if this angle is 90 degrees, cosinus 90 degrees equals 0. So all of that equals 0, and you have Pythagoras. That's the same theorem, finally. That's clear for... or I make a drawing. I can make a drawing if you want.
So you put a strike point on your hammer, mark a little strike point on your hammer, and physically measure that as you're gluing it on.
Oh yeah. Normally, when I glue it, first I clamp all my hammer heads all together on the jig.
Yeah.
I put a line exactly at the top of the hammer with just a pencil.
Yeah.
And with that, I can shape as well the hammer eventually. But at the end, if the line disappears, I can do it again after shaping. It doesn't matter. And after, just with the vernier, you can take the distance inside the piano. And with that, you are pretty sure your angle is fine, your shank length is fine as well. You have exactly the good geometry. So you can have fine result. Of course, for high treble, we do that very often just with the sound, and we can change eventually this distance because of the sound. You know that already. And the jig I use, that's probably the Spurlock jig. I make just a drawing of that. I do not use the second rail on the Spurlock jig. I don't like that very much. I prefer to take it, not to have that on the jig. That's a very bad idea because everybody thinks that the hammer felt is straight from the bass to the last treble, but that's not, especially on the last section. The hammer felt do something like that. That's not straight. So if you use a rail behind the hammer, that's not a very good idea. That's better to use it to use the rail, but on the top of the hammer with the line.
Straight edge.
Yeah, you can do both, and the top of the hammer and the tail, of course, to have all the tail perfectly.
And you just use your vernier down to your center pin and set some
some
samples.
guide.
Yeah.
Okay, so weapon. So there is, there is plenty of different types of weapons. Do you have any question about hammers, or is that clear? Nearly.
I didn't quite see your calculating your ball length. I couldn't quite read. It was quite small.
Yeah, that's pretty small. I can make use of my
Or maybe can you share that afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's yours. Don't go back now.
That's the Al-Kashi theorem. If you can have just have that on the Excel file. I have that already. I use SolidWorks, but I use as well Excel sometimes. Depends on what I do, and that's pretty easy to do it with Excel. So the dimension I will give you, that's for modern action. So of course, do not try to use it on an Erard piano or something like that. I do not take responsibility for that. There is different type of weapon, but there is mainly two category. that I will show you just after. What I call the Steinway saw, that's not invited by Steinway, that's the weapon with a difference just there. The center pin is not in the middle of this part. You know what I mean? Or yeah, there is 3 millimeters of the difference between this center pin and this one. 3 millimeters vertical distance. So for this type of weapon, the distance between the vertical distance between hammer center pin and the weapon should be 64. If you want to be very sure you have a standard weapon, you just have to measure, this one should be fine, or this one, to be sure there is exactly 9 millimeters, 99 millimeters between the two center pins. That's the standard. When you have that, you can be nearly sure you have a standard action. Even if there is some difference afterwards, it doesn't matter so much. You can just control you have 99 right there. And for both type of weapons. The saw 64, so you can adjust the wood there to be sure you have 64. And what we call the spread, we use the same word in French, William. We use the same word. I don't know why, but that's the same word. 130 millimeters, and always with this type of weapon. So with the difference, the 3 millimeters difference. And so with this 2 dimension, you have the position of your weapon, the exact position of your weapon. You can adjust the position of your weapon. You can adjust the spread. It's not this drawing. Yes. Normally on normal piano action, you have just there. You can see something. Yeah. You have oblong hole. That's a good idea or a bad idea. It depends on. Yeah. The problem is there is some technician who try to make modification there. And 99% of the time that's a very bad idea. And so, but...
I just leave mine loose.
yeah, loose, that's fine. Yeah.
It finds the same.
Yeah,
just find a good position.
Variable touch.
Yeah. So that's why, for me, when I work on an existing action frame with this oblong hole, I cut this part, just there. I make a square. I make a wood, with only one hole on it, too big, this wood part. I drill the hole exactly the diameter of the screw, no room. I put glue on it. I install it on the piano, and before the glue is dry, I adjust the spread and I screw, clack. That's understandable, nearly. I can show. I have some photos of all of that on existing piano if you want. I should have that somewhere. And so after that, the next technician can't change anything. So that's.
Well, you say that. I got a drill.
And the problem is with Steinway, of course. It's always the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is even if you buy new tubular frame, the dimensions are not good, and so they are not good, and they are not the same if you buy 2 or 3 times the same, exactly the same model, the same tubular frame at the same day. You receive 3 different tubular frame. The quality of the making, that's just unbelievable. When you screw, even when you use original Steinway part, you screw it with this stupid felt under the flanges.
I think that's the technical name. Is
Stupid. And even with sometimes I found one with a spread 110, So the problem is if you reduce the spread like that, after you have a lot of problem with the jack, with the button there. Sometimes you are not in front of it, even when the action is adjusted and everything. So that's a huge problem, and that's not easy to adjust. So the only way is the Steinway technician put paper just under this stupid felt and between the flanges and the frame. The action frame.
I usually order like the stupid paper with the stupid felt in the box.
The price is not stupid.
It's Steinway, it's a stupid price.
It's not so expensive. It's about 500 euros, I think, for the frame. That's a lot of work, finally, to do that. It's nearly acceptable, but the problem is that's not good. So.
Has anyone decided to build or design aftermarket frames for Steinways?
Oh my! When you just said that.
I have a friend who tried.
That's just what you're telling me to build, really, isn't it? We've all had a gripe with it.
I think in Poland they can do that. Yeah, in Poland easy.
So you just set your distances and tell them what you want. And someone will make it. Bend the frame up before they put the tubes in.
Yeah. For my own piano, I have a Steinway B 1888, so with 85 keys. And the problem is you can't find a new tubular frame with 85 keys. So I sent the original frame to Poland. I told them with this part I want a spread of 112.5. First time was a little bit better. 112.5 and they did it. They replaced only the tube and they cut for the last 3 notes. They can do it here, and they can, we can buy only the tube, not the full tubular frame. But that's a big problem. And the other very big, but I will not talk about all the problem we has Steinway because we need a full week, I think. But you probably already know that on the Steinway action, this part there, the wood just under the tubular frame, is not horizontal. There is an angle. That's what we talked with Michael yesterday after some beers. There is an angle there, and you have to find the good angles, because with this angle you adjust the height difference between the 2 center pins. If you have a different angle, the tubular frame is not exactly in the good position, and the height difference is not the same. And the problem as well is they are not standard. So if you buy 5 tubular axon frame together, every time you have to change a little bit the angle for everyone. That's mainly between 1 degree and 1.56 to maximum I found. It's very easy to calculate that. But after you can have a good result if you do that on Steinway. That's pretty nice. What else? So that's for this type of weapon. If you have this type of weapon with straight, with the center pin exactly in the center, that's 67 for the height difference. That's pretty normal because you just lose the 3 millimeters height, and you find them. It was 64, now that's 67. That's pretty normal. And for the spread, that's pretty normal as well. That's just triangulation. 114.7, 73. It's fine. 7. It's fine. For the spread.
So the difference between these 2 jacks, then you would also imagine translates to the jack.
Yeah.
So between these 2 weapons, they have different jack lengths.
Yeah. And even for there is, I show only 2 weapons, but there is some weapons who looks nearly the same and have different jack. And even if you take the exact measurement, even the jack length, that's very important.
Yep.
So between center pin and the top of the jack, it could be different. It could be different if you choose Tokiwa, Renner, or and even for the same model. Yeah. And even for the same brand, Steinway use a different lens for the jack for the old one, and so I showed two types of weapon because that's pretty easy to show, and the dimension I give you are fine, even if the jack are a little bit different. That's always this dimension. If you have the famous 99 between the two center pins of the weapon, I can show you. You can use this dimension. And after, of course, the jack, that's a huge subject. We will talk about it a little bit about the magic lines. I just should hide that. When the angle change, there, just there, you have it's not perfect. Change only that. You do the regulation again. The same one. You don't change anything.
So much.
That's much better.
Yeah, it's correct.
I have never seen it. So,
Francois, do you offer a service where you would design a new action for a rebuild?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my second life.
Yeah.
That's what I do at night. Essentially for overseas, but very often it's just for people a little bit crazy who just try a lot of different technicians, and they are still complaining, and they don't really understand why. And so the drawing there, that's for one of my customers. I use it, but for presentation, yeah. This drawing that I use, that's a drawing I can use for nearly every piano. I just change very quickly the dimension in less than 2 hours, 2-3 hours of drawing. I can just change a little bit this drawing there to another piano.
Yep.
And
charge them, baby.
Yeah. But that's you can't imagine the work it is just to do that. The first one.
Yeah, wow.
That's some hours.
Yeah.
Just a lot of hours. But after one time, that's
Do you incorporate
That's fine.
any Stanwood principles with precision touch design and that type of thing?
sorry.
Do you incorporate precision touch designs, David Stanwood?
Not sure. I know them just. I know the Stanwood theory, and when Stanwood has this idea and talk about it, I think it was a huge progress on the piano making, but I do not use it exactly like they want, and I do not agree with everything. That's a very good idea to to have a link between hammer weight and action ratio, but the link is not so direct. That's much more complicated. I think I'm totally sure Stanwood knows that, but the problem is if he tries to explain it, that's nobody will use this system. That's just too much complicated.
So you would still weigh a set of hammers, and you'd want to have them conform to a curve.
To a curve, not the Stanwood curve, but my curve, but
And the same with other parameters.
Yeah. But we have to take care about the hammer weight. That's totally sure. But I will talk a little bit. I will talk about that just after the magic line.
Okay.
About action ratio, that's a huge subject as well. just one thing I forgot to tell you about the dimension. All of that. That's okay. Yeah, if you have 99 millimeters between the two center pin of the weapon and a 10 millimeters roll and 17 millimeters. That's the standard dimension between the center pin and the center of the roll. 17 and 10 millimeters for the diameter. If you want, and I totally recommend that, to change the roll diameter, normally you have to change spread and height difference a little bit, and if you change the position of the roller, you really have to change spread and height difference. That's not the same dimension.
Interesting thing. Can I just mention about rollers? I've done a couple of, or 3 or 4 WNG shanks and flanges and things. And their rollers, I put my micrometer across it, the vernier, across the roller, and I got a shock because I'd ordered 10 millimeter rollers. They're 10 millimeters high, but 9 millimeters
Oh, really?
across. Yeah, they've actually got.
But that's the most important, nearly.
Yeah. And I sent the wrong. I rang them up, and they said, "Have you actually measured the other way?" So, good. So yeah, trap for young players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I thought I'd sent the wrong product. But
that's very
I don't know
interesting.
whether that makes a difference, but it's just the jack has already done its job.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Get out of the way.
roller diameter as well. That's very interesting to change it and to see the difference. Available on the market normally there is only 10, 9 and 8. And change a little bit your action ratio. If you change only that, the action ratio change a little bit. And that's more important, I think, the distance between the moment of the jack touch the button and the moment of the hammer escape. And of course that's shorter with 8 millimeters. And for the pianist there is a huge difference as well. Yeah. So yeah, just wanted to know that, to tell you that. So about the magic lines, so I talk you about this line. You can see there. There is different philosophy, so the magic line should be straight at the beginning of the movement or later, or at the end of the movement, or so you choose what you want. But mostly I use the magic line straight halfway of the key, not halfway of the hammer. That's not the same, exactly. No, not exactly the same. There is magic line everywhere in the piano action, so I can't show you all of them. There is another one who is pretty important, but you nearly can't do anything with that, except if you are run versed. The Australian guy will take care about that. So that's between the center pin, the contact between roller and the jack, and the weapon center pin. That's never straight, but you can try to be close to this line, more or less. And another magic line, pretty important as well, that's what I said just before, between the center pin, jack center pin, and the jack there. And if this magic line is straight halfway, you have no moving between the button and the jack. That's pretty interesting, and you have no damage as well with time. Another magic line, you don't really need to know that, but because you can't do anything for it. But the keyboard maker and the piano maker should take care about it. That's when you make a keyboard, normally you should have a line straight between pilot, the balance, the key bushing, the position of the balance, and the front key bushing, or to be exact, the way you play the place you put your finger. It should be straight. It's never straight for all the keyboards, but we try normally to have that straight in the middle, because if this line is straight, you can keep your key bushings long while. Yeah. And you can see very often, I'm sure you're already seen that, there is some piano who have problem with only one side of the key bushings, and that's only because of that. That's the only reason. Yeah. And you can see, for example, with this piano, that's not straight in the middle, but that's the first, that's the A and the A sharp. And I will not tell you which one it is, because I don't want to say something bad about Hamburg manufacturer.
They all know where you live.
So, for their concert models, for example. So, okay. So, the subject we talked just before, action ratio. I don't know really why, but this the action ratio is something very important for a lot of American technicians. They just have a lot of theory about that. I think I read everything about how to calculate it. All the theory are totally wrong, but that's something they really want to find. So to be very clear, so that's the ratio between the distance the key dips and the hammer rise. So that's clear for everybody. Yeah. The value is variable during the movement. That's very important to know. When we talk about an action ratio of 5.6, that's the value is true only at one point of the movement. That's not a constant, that's not a straight line, that's a curve. The action ratio is at 1 millimeter deep, or 5 millimeter, or 8 millimeters. That's not the same action ratio. But it's traditionally measured at 5 or 6 millimeter of deep. That's sort of average, and we can work a little bit with this value. That's important, it's necessary to know the action ratio, but that's not sufficient. And if you tell me I have an action ratio of 5.6, I tell you okay, but I know nothing about your action. That's very important to understand. You can have two different actions, very different, and exactly the same action ratio at one point of the movement. If you just take the measurement at one point, yeah, you can have two actions totally different, with different levels everywhere, and but with the same value. But however, that's important. So yeah, just the regulation dimension are based on action ratio. That's pretty normal. And of course, that's what we talk about when we talk about Stanwood. There is an influence on the hammer's weight. 5.6 is the standard of piano industry, so that's a ratio, so without unity. And yeah, so the direction could be different. What about Stanwood? And I think you really have to know that there is a link between action ratio and the hammer's weight, but that's not so direct, and that's much more complicated, much more difficult, because imagine you change, I will not do that on this drawing, but what I can do, maybe I can do. If you change your action ratio, for example, if I move the, where is it? The position of the roller, if you change this dimension to 15, for example, I hope it will not complain too much. That's fine. So the action ratio will be very different, but there is much more impact if you change the action ratio on the hammer compared to if you change it for the key, for example. Because I change this distance there. I can totally change the position of the balance and have exactly the same ratio, but that's not the same action. And the key has not so much inertia, but the hammer has a lot of inertia. So for the pianists, that's very, very, very different if you change the position of the roller there. And for example, in some American piano, American Steinway, even Hamburg Steinway, but old one, Michael, you can have this problem as well on yours. It was not 17, it was 15.5 or 16 sometimes. And the problem is, if you change this dimension, you really, really need to have a very, very light hammer because of this problem of inertia. You give speed to your hammer when you do that, and for the pianist, that's just a nightmare. If you, for example, they are available, you can buy shanks with 15 millimeters, 15.5 millimeters for the roller. But if you use modern hammer with that, you have 90% of chance the pianist will complain, because that's very difficult now to have light hammers, very, very difficult. Even if you cut them and you make the tapering and everything, that's very, very, very difficult. On my piano, for example, on the original hammer of my old Steinway 1888, I think the first hammer of the bass, the weight was less than 9 grams, and compared to new one, that's 11, 12 grams, and that's a huge difference, 3 grams. And the hammer of my piano, I think they have never been shaped or anything, they are nearly new. And the last of the high treble, it was 3 grams or something like that. That's just impossible with new hammer to have this weight. So that's why it's tricky to use 15 millimeters shanks. So that's just what I wanted to say about action ratio. Quick question about that, probably. You have some question? Fine. Okay. Very good. Very good. And so, what you can do on your life every day with all the piano, even the upright, you can see. When you take care a little bit about this problem, sometimes you can solve some problems. I can talk you about just an experience I had some weeks ago there in New Zealand. I just tuned a terrible Chinese upright. I don't even remember the brand, but a new one, nearly new. Everything is fine on the piano for a Chinese, but everything is fine. She just complained about the tuning and some sticking keys. So I look the piano, And yes, the problem is the jack. So upright, the jack has some problems to come back under the hammer. But all center pins are pretty loose. All of them, even the weapon. The spring of the jack is totally fine. The spring of the hammer as well. The key bushing are loose. There is room everywhere on the action. So what is the problem?
That the angle of the button is too far back, and may also have a little lip on it, so the jack can't get nicely.
Yeah, I thought about that, and I changed the regulation of the pilot. I just add room there.
Yeah.
Same problem. Even with 3-4 millimeters room, when you start to play, even with the room, the jack can't come back under the hammer.
Yeah.
Not enough key back weighting.
Yeah. Keys front weighted.
The weight, when you take the measurement, the 50 grams of down weight, that was nearly good. If you just look everything is fine, you know. But
Is it that the angle of the hammer is too far?
it could be, but that's not what I found.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested.
The problem
It's
was,
the keys.
yeah, and I just push the weapon, and the keys fall down along,
Yeah.
like on some old Steinway, but with old Steinway that's pretty well made. So for the upright, so there is not so much problem. But yeah, the balance is not at a good position.
Yeah.
So if we just change the position of the balance, just a little bit, just 1 millimeter is fine, and the key just come back to the good position, and so the jack can come back under the hammer. And she bought her piano to another technician, I don't know who, near Wellington, and he doesn't find the problem, so that's why she called the Wellington Piano Service, and it was me this time. So we found the. I told her, yeah, there is no problem. You just have to replace your keyboard on the Chinese piano. That's just 2,000 euros for that. That's probably the price of your piano.
Oh, that's good news for her then.
No,
isn't it? Yeah.
no, there is cheapest solution. I think that's Stenlund or the PTDA who created balance punchings,
Yeah.
who are not felt and round, but a sort of plastic Teflon or something like that, and with a triangle on the top, the hole, but the triangle is not in front of the hole. There is the idea is just to change the balance position. Yeah.
What do you call those? What are they called?
That's sold by Jan.
Accelerated.
Yeah. Through accelerated.
I've never used them.
Not that one. Different device, and someone developed, not Stanwood, but Stanwood uses. The name of device, like I forgot. I had a photo in laptop or somewhere.
Okay.
I can show you tomorrow. Or you've got the photo
Is
of
it-
that device.
Is it,
No.
what catalogs is it available?
Rubber made, the triangular shape,
Yeah.
but like this. But balance board is here or here or
Yeah.
here or here,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you can change the balance position of actual key by still having same balance pin.
Yeah.
I
just
can't remember
Just
the name.
the same theory as when you can. No, we have a small Kawaii Grand, and the action ratio is definitely incorrect. And you go, okay, well we're going to cut those balance punchings back a little bit further.
Yeah.
When the problem with the action ratio is with the keyboard,
Yeah.
it could be somewhere else as well.
Oh,
I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised in this.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's a solution, and of course for this customer, for example, we move the balance position to the front. Yeah. So we accelerate the action ratio for this piano.
And
Ju-
just
a
a
word
question,
of warning,
would
there
that
are,
change?
sorry,
Would that change the, the heaviness?
Touch weight.
Touch
So,
weight?
yeah,
We
yeah,
should
a little
change.
bit, yeah, probably. But at least it can solve a little bit the problem. It depends if you move it a lot or not.
Yeah.
If you move it a little bit, maybe no, there is no big difference. But you will, in this situation, you will have to change the keys deep. And
sorry, I was just going to say, I met a very similar situation in Auckland recently, which was annoying the customer so much, they changed the piano. And we gave him a piano where I put a tiny, I mean like half a 6mm weight, 10mm behind the balance pin to improve the repetition. All right.
that's quite a lot.
Anyway, the result was astonishing. All right. Suddenly this piano took off. The piano felt slick, but the biggest change, the one that really I went holy moly, was the tonal change. This piano had developed from a straightforward New Asian piano, all right, into something that rocked your socks off. You went boom, and it had resonance, it had tonal drive, because the action was being driven correctly.
Yeah.
It was just, as I said, I mean, people who heard that piano before and after went, holy moly, you know, what is this? That had taken the piano from an average Asian piano to something that you would, if you turned your back, you would say, oh, this is a bit of quality, where has this come from? Yeah. And just as Francois said, the clue is, and they're very difficult to deal with, to deal with. But there are lots out there. There are heaps, and there are more and more, and I don't know why the manufacturers are doing it. It's really annoying. Just do the old left pedal test. The stamp on the left pedal. If the keys wink, you've got front weighted keys.
Yeah.
And warning. All right, what are we going to do here? I think in the meantime, the one of those Stanwood solutions, or either a cut punching or something like that, is probably a better way to go if you want to keep whatever tone of characteristic the piano had intact.
Do you mind me also saying that whenever I've defined the balance point better in a piano, because when you've got your felt punching there, it's a big surface. You can immediately feel all the escapements in the piano way better.
Yeah.
They're way more defined all of a sudden, and certainly in those quiet grands, because lots of them just feel like mush. It's just like, where is everything in here? And so it fixes a number of different little problems, even if it might not, it's not fixing all the problems, but it's a good cheap way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to hear from anybody who has any experience with those. What do you think they were called? Those little. Yeah. We'll find
it
them.
should be accelerated action or something like that. That's a stupid name as well.
There is a name for them.
Yeah.
There were some guys talking about them on one of the Facebook forums
Yeah, that's right.
a few weeks back, I think.
Yeah.
I kind of glossed over it, I didn't go right into it.
The big warning about that is, sorry, I know it's your presentation, but the big warning about that is you're sitting there and it's a lovely sunny day and you're regulating away, you're getting rid of lost motion, and you can't get rid of the lost motion because the keys are just keep going down and down. All right, so there's all kinds of alerts that should be warning. It's a warning to put in your toolbox.
Yeah. Exactly. Normally, for the keys, the piano maker consider now to have a ratio for the key equal to 2.03, and if you have a difference on your own keyboard than more than 0.005, that's this value, you have to change your keyboard. That's what said Matthias Stöckler when I met him some years ago. That's the sort of Renner boss in Germany. Yes, he considered it should be es muss so sein 2.03. So if you have something different on your piano, you can imagine you can have some problems. I have a question, and if someone can give me the right answer, that's a stupid question. And if someone can find the answer, exactly what I mean, I'm ready to bring next time a very good bottle of French champagne to him. What is the difference between a 9-feet piano action and a 5 or 6 feet piano action?
Could you just repeat that night?
What is the difference between a concert grand piano action
Oh yeah.
and a small baby
Any
grand?
keys?
So yes, but
One burns for longer.
what is the difference? You will always have, whatever the brand, not only of course the key length, but yeah.
Taper length and the case. Taper length and a concert grands usually have longer bass.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, the trapezoidal, but I mean about the action ratio.
Oh, the ratio.
Not the general action ratio, but there is something you really can't adapt between a baby grand piano and a concert grand.
Yeah.
There is something you just can't change it.
Yeah. It's the ratio of
Oh, it's
Because
the
you
key-
know,
it's the key
if you
ratio.
if you change the dimension of the key,
yeah.
you can keep for the pilot exactly the same ratio if you want.
Oh, yeah.
So
The key fronts, the key tops are the same size, aren't they?
probably
Oh, well, we're going for different.
you really want to be drunk with a champagne bottle, no?
The key height is the one thing that you
The
can't
key?
change.
Height. It's got a
Yes.
the longer key. It's another 2 millimeters higher.
Yeah, normally that's about 27. 27? Yeah, 27 for a concert grand,
You don't want
and
to
it
do
could be 24 for. Yeah, but that's not where is the what I mean.
The weight of the action.
True, better, a bit better.
Yeah.
You can have the cork if you want.
Yeah, you'd be right. Where are you going to put that quote?
Well, we
Yeah, the distance between the
Yeah,
pins.
you can replace the hammer and have light hammer if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it just the distance between the pins?
Yeah.
The number.
Nearly there, nearly there.
The amount of key
Hold
left.
it.
The amount of key left.
Yeah, no.
And we're talking about the action, yes?
Action or action keyboard.
I want that shit.
Everything.
Yeah, probably movement of the capstan, or maybe you say pilot. It's more straight up and down with longer key.
Not the capstan now. I tell you the answer.
What is it? 28 frustrated technicians?
One's been to where they actually
So,
whipping
Let them stew, tell them tomorrow. I'll come back then.
imagine, so,
The spread.
no, if you keep the same weapon, you can
Yeah, same
keep it as
weapon,
well.
same hammer
Yeah,
dimension. So
If you change the dimension of the key, so that's the difference, the main difference,
Yeah.
okay, between the grand concert grand. You change the position of the balance, imagine. So, what's changed exactly? The front lever there, okay? The position between the balance and the capstan. But what doesn't change? What is behind the capstan? There, this distance, the back check. That's nearly always the same distance.
Yeah, okay.
And sometimes just exactly the same distance. Even if you have a concert grand or a very small one, that's always this distance is always the same. But because you change the position of the balance, you adapt the balance to the capstan, but you do nothing for the back check.
Right.
Normally, you have to reduce this distance as well, and not the same value.
So that means that during being able to push it down, you have much more leverage over the weight at the end of the key in comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So that's why on the concert piano, normally, that's a little bit easier to adjust your back check because the ratio at this point of the key is a bit higher.
Yeah.
So your back check can be pretty far at the start of the movement. The back check can be pretty far off the hammer without causing any trouble. And on a very small piano, that's a problem. You can have problems and to adjust the back check regulation,
Yeah.
the 15 millimeters between the strings and the hammer.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more tricky because when you start the movement, you can have a contact between hammerhead and that there is no solution. There is a solution, but the only solution there is to compromise with the position of the capstan.
Yeah.
If you and that's what we should do normally. That's to change a little bit the famous 2.03 of the key ratio, and to compromise with the back check. That's a bit tricky. That's not easy. The other solution as well is to have different shank lengths for a small piano and the drum. If you change the shanks, you can solve all the problems. But you have not the same inertia. You know that the piano, that's always a compromise somewhere. Yeah. If you want to solve a problem somewhere, you change something else somewhere else.
Do you get to keep the champagne? But I get the cork.
Other question, or maybe?
Does that mean we have to buy you champagne?
That's not what I say, but
Sure.
you are welcome to. Always happy.
It doesn't hurt. Yes.
And of course, as well, there is a lot to talk about the damper. I do not talk about the damper today, but that's a huge subject as well. Very, very important. There is magic line there as well. There is ratio. That's pretty important.
Yeah. You don't want them hanging down. They don't feel right when they're that much.
So, sorry.
Whenever the dampers are, the levers are sitting like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The position of the center pin for the damper lever and the whole system. I have probably a drawing somewhere, just a few minutes. About that.
To see it.
This one is the drawing of the Tokiwa system, shorter of course, but that's just the basic drawing. I make modification when I change the piano. So it's exactly the plan of the Tokiwa. Without this part, they are not so. But just right there, you should have normally exactly the center pin and of the lever and the center pin of the rail in the same position. Steinway changed that, and there is a huge difference between the two pins. That's why you have the whole lever move. There is reason. I understand why they do that, but I understand that that's stupid as well. Everything moves. That's just because they have a very bad sostenuto system. Do you know that with Steinway sometimes you can have a problem with the sostenuto and solve it only by changing the regulation of the forte pedal. Only that. I lived this situation before, some years ago for a concert. The technician, the last technician came to the concert, and the pianist complained because just the sustain cannot work. And that's just because the last one was just the forte pedal, just adjusted with a big room before the damper are working. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if you adjust your forte pedal like that, the whole system is definitely not at the good position because of this difference between the two pins.
Yeah.
And of course, the lever are a little bit back on the back, and the sostenuto can't work.
Yeah.
That's stupid, but once a turn and a half. But Tokiwa, they make a very good copy of the Steinway system, but they change. That's already, when you buy the Tokiwa system, this part is already drilled. You have already this hole there, and that's exactly at the good position.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you just have to glue it. That's,
So they supply the tray, the whole thing.
yeah, they supplied the whole lever, the rail too long.
Yeah.
These two parts in wood there, the pins as well, the two pins, all the felts, including the one for the rails behind. I don't know the word in English, but where the lever touch. You know,
Damper cushion.
yeah, damper. Yeah. They supply as well this felt, and that's very well cut, like Japanese people. That's perfect. Just have to glue it. That's and you have to drill, of course, with the good division. You have to drill the rail, but that's pretty easy. You need 1 day to do that.
All right.